Sometimes, before a story unfolds with all its aching and sweetness, it begins with the most ordinary of things. A hum of cicadas, the clap of screen doors, the snick of envelopes pressed through mail slots. In the town of Mathers Grove, mornings begin much the same as they did 50 years ago. Not much has changed. The sun still spills amber over the gabled rooftops. Children still pedal their bicycles to the sound of whirring spokes and barking dogs. Wind chimes still speak in shy whispers on porches lined with potted marigolds and rocking chairs. And every morning but Sunday, a white and red postal truck lumbers softly along the cracked asphalt streets. At the wheel, always at the wheel, is Joseph Avery, a man most people know, even if they've never spoken a word to him. Joseph is 67. His shoulders have begun to round with time, and his knees murmur if he climbs stairs too quickly. But his hands are steady, and his grip on the steering wheel is gentle. He drives like someone who's memorized every bump and bend in the road, not just with his tires, but with years of repetition. Children wave to him first thing, sometimes with juice still on their chins from breakfast, sometimes with drawings to mail to faraway cousins. He waves back, the same way he always has, just a little lift of the fingers from the steering wheel. Silent, polite, and warm. Joseph has delivered the mail on this same route for 34 years. He's seen boys become fathers, little girls grow into women. He's delivered wedding invitations and divorce papers, sympathy cards with shaky handwriting, and bills no one wanted. And he's treated each letter the same, carefully, respectfully, as if each one might change someone's life. The people of Mathers Grove trust him in the way small towns trust a certain kind of man, quiet, measured, consistent. He walks slow steps up gravel driveways and pushes envelopes into mailboxes with a kind of reverence, as though he still believes that mail matters, that it says something about being remembered, being counted. If you asked anyone in town how old Joseph is, most couldn't tell you exactly. He exists outside clear measurement, like the oak tree that stands at the center of the park, or the bell above the hardware store that rings when someone walks in. But Eden's stories, nestled safely in routine, can be stirred without warning. And this one starts not with a letter, not with an address, but with something far quieter, a shape on the side of the road. It was early spring. The sky was still half gray in the morning from winter's breath, but daffodils were starting to break through the soil like small declarations. Joseph was halfway through his rate when he saw her. She sat just past the bend where the two sycamores leaned toward each other across Griffin Road. There, beside the shallow ditch that collects rainwater from the hill, was a dog. Thin, mud-caked, a golden coat dulled with dust and rain. She didn't move as he approached, just lowered her head slightly and thumped her tail once against the earth. Joseph slowed without thinking, shifted the truck into park and stepped out, folding the last bite of his sandwich into a paper napkin and walking toward her like someone stepping cautiously across thin ice. She didn't growl, she didn't back away. He wasn't sure what made him kneel. Curiosity, maybe, or something older and more instinctive. "Hey there," he murmured. His voice was gruff from long years and too few conversations. She lifted her head. Her eyes were deeply set, the color of warm cider, the kind he drank with his wife on the porch when the kids were little. With a tentative mouth, she took the offered sandwich, chewed slowly. Her eyes never left his. Joseph straightened, brushed the grass from his knees, and climbed back into the truck. He watched her in the rearview mirror for a long moment. She didn't chase the truck, didn't whimper. She just sat, tail twitching faintly, until he turned the corner and couldn't see her anymore. That night, he told no one. There wasn't anyone to tell, not really. His house was quiet. He made dinner, canned soup and toast, sat in his chair with a crossword half finished on his lap. But before he went to sleep, he folded another sandwich into a napkin and set it by the door, just in case. And next morning, the same hush settled over Mather's Grove. A pearly fog draped the fields. Crows congregated on the telephone wires, their cries bouncing against the damp air. Joseph's boots scuffed softly across the porch as he left the house, sandwich folded neatly inside a napkin just like before. He didn't say aloud who the sandwich was for, didn't even fully admit it to himself. But when he reached the bend on Griffin Road, where the sycamores leaned like old friends, he slowed without thinking. And there she was. Same place, same posture, still thin, but more alert today, her ears twitching forward as if she'd been waiting. Joseph rolled to a stop. The truck hummed into quiet, and for a heartbeat, they just looked at each other. He stepped out slowly again, like yesterday, careful not to spook her. The sandwich was unwrapped before he even reached her, and when he held it out, her tail gave a tentative wag, brushing the ground in rhythm. This time, she didn't hesitate. She stood on shaky legs and moved toward him, ate from his hand. Still no caller, still no sound beyond her chewing and the dip of wind through dry grass. "All right, girl," Joseph muttered softly, brushing crumbs from his fingers. "You take care now." He climbed back inside his truck and rolled forward. This time, when he checked the mirror, something made him tap the brakes. She was trotting after him, not fast, not frantic, just a determined little lope, as if keeping him in her sight was enough. She followed for a few hundred yards before lagging behind. Joseph sighed gently, pressed on. The next day, she was there again, slightly closer to where he usually stopped, as if she'd measured her timing. He handed over part of his lunch again. She sat, ate, and trotted a few steps along, their quiet ritual deepening without a word between them. By Thursday, she wagged when she saw the truck's red grill appear between the trees. Her eyes brighter now, patchy fur starting to shift with new energy. Joseph found himself smiling as he spotted her, just slightly, the corners of his mouth rising in a way that felt unfamiliar. He started calling her something under his breath, not even realizing for a few days he was doing it. "Sonny," he said one afternoon as she approached, tail high, "because of your eyes." She didn't need a name, but having one made something shift, made her part of something, even if that something was just an old man and a sandwich wrapped in napkin. Joseph noticed other things quickly after that, how his lunches included a little more now, half an apple, a hard-boiled egg, how he lingered a minute longer after each delivery, how his thoughts, once filled with address numbers and potholes, often drifted to a muddy patch off Griffin Road. And Mather's Grove, quiet and observant, began noticing too. "Saw a dog chasing after your truck the other day," Mr. Dooling from the hardware store commented while handing over a package. "Golden thing? Yours?" "No," Joseph said simply. "Just a friend." The mail truck bumped along its familiar path every morning, and on certain days, a flash of gold darted through the brush, keeping pace. Children began asking about her, peeking around hedges when they saw the truck. "Does she have a name?" they asked with sticky fingers and wide eyes. Joseph only nodded. "Sonny." They'd giggle. "That's a nice name for a dog." Each time, she waited at a new bend or corner, as if mapping out his route in her own quiet way. Sometimes she disappeared into the woods again after she received her meal. Other times, she would follow for longer stretches, her movements growing stronger, more sure. Once, when it rained, she didn't show up. Joseph told himself not to be concerned. Still, he left the sandwich in its napkin near the tree root where she often rested. The next day, it was gone, with no soggy crumbs left behind. He didn't mind the wet truck bench anymore, didn't mind staying later on the roads, didn't notice how some days he hummed while driving, old tunes he hadn't thought of in years. And all because a thin, hungry dog with eyes like warm cider had decided to sit at a roadside once upon a gray spring morning. It began, as many things in Mather's Grove do, with repetition, patterns so gentle you don't notice them becoming meaningful until it's too late for them to be anything else. Sunny started appearing more often, never every day, but often enough that Joseph found himself looking for her around corners and turns before he even meant to. She stopped being a roadside encounter and started becoming expectation, routine, a quiet part of the morning like the grind of his truck's engine or the scent of paper warmed by the sun. Some mornings, she'd wait near Crestwood Lane, as if she knew that was when Joseph would be finishing his thermos of coffee. Other days, she'd be further along on Clearwater Hill, tongue lolling, trotting alongside the truck, with such easy familiarity that it made him smile, before he remembered he was smiling. At first, she'd only follow for a block or two, then disappear into the tall grass with hardly a sound. But as weeks slipped into months, she began staying longer, sometimes until nearly noon, sometimes until the last letter was delivered and Joseph turned the truck toward home. Children noticed. They started waiting with cookies or bits of string cheese in their pockets, just in case she showed up. Some even wrote out paper name tags for her. "This is Sunny. She is nice." One girl stapled hers to a popsicle stick and planted it in her front yard beside the mailbox. Elderly folks began sitting on their porches a little longer, listening for the cadence of Joseph's engine and scanning the brush for a flicker of golden fur. Sunny didn't bark, didn't beg, but she was a presence, seen more often than the mayor, more dependable than the weather. Joseph never told anyone what it meant to have her waiting for him, but in his chest, beneath the hum of habit, something unfamiliar had begun to take root, a swelling, a warmth, like holding a freshly baked roll in cold hands. He tried to take her with him one afternoon, gently coaxing her into the cab as raindrops began to whisper on the windshield. She stepped inside for a moment, paws muddy, nose damp. But when they reached his driveway later that evening, she hopped out before he could even shift the truck into park, wandered off into the woods on feet that barely disturbed the wet leaves. She always did that, stayed just to the edge, never passed, like mist burning off a field. There, then gone. So Joseph adapted. He left a folded blanket beneath the porch in case she ever came near, a silver bowl filled with water. Behind the seat in his truck, a small tin with treats that he never touched himself, not even when he skipped breakfast. They didn't need to live under the same roof to know each other. That was never the point. His thoughts shifted when he drove. He no longer counted steps between mailboxes or replayed the ache in his knees like a tired poem. Instead, he watched the tree lines, hummed tunelessly when he was sure no one could hear, wondered whether Sunny would be waiting at the curve beyond Miller's Pond or behind the slope where a new house was going up. Sunny wasn't just a dog anymore. She was the part of his day untouched by obligation, the stretch of road that felt light instead of heavy. Sometimes he talked to her. Nothing important, just small confessions. "Little chilly this morning," he'd say, or "That red mailbox on Wexler's loose again." She never answered, but she listened. And sometimes that's all a man truly needs. One night, Joseph dreamt of her. Not in any strange way, just a simple image of her running through snow, playful, paw prints vanishing behind her like shadows. Before, his dreams had been quiet, empty. Now he woke with her name on his tongue. He thought about his wife sometimes, how she used to leave puzzle pieces on the kitchen table unfinished, just so he could sit down and pretend he'd done the hard part. He imagined if she could see him now, she'd smile, maybe chide him gently. "You're not keeping that dog in the truck, are you?" He would have answered, "No, but she keeps me." In town, people stopped asking if she was his. They started offering questions they didn't bother disguising with casualness. "She's looking better these days," said Mrs. Halberd, squinting through her bifocals. "You feeding her?" Joseph nodded. "Might be." "Well," she said with a quiet approval, "she's got eyes like honey, and manners better than most people." Joseph just shrugged, but a part of him swelled with the quiet joy that comes from being seen, even when you didn't ask to be. That summer, when the school kids started leaving chalk drawings on the sidewalks again, hopscotch grids and crooked suns, more than a few dogs appeared between the flowers and clouds. Always golden, always smiling, always labeled Sunny. She never wore a collar, and Joseph never tried to make her. That kind of bond doesn't need a leash. It only needs to be honored. A wind blew sharp and wide from the north, bringing with it a grit that made shutters groan and telephone wires hum like tired violins. The forecast had called it a nor'easter, but Mathers Grove had seen its share of winter storms before. People salted their driveways, closed the schools, and trusted the seasons to pass as they always had. Mail delivery was canceled for the day, a rare thing. Joseph couldn't remember the last time he'd stayed home on a weekday, his route paused by anything other than a holiday. The roads were silent, muffled beneath white. Chimneys released slow spirals of smoke, and the whole town backed into itself, like a held breath. Joseph spent the morning pacing. Not much, just from one window to another. He told himself he was checking the weather, or counting the inches of snowfall by the fence posts. But the truth took the shape of a name he whispered once or twice: Sunny. He hadn't seen her yesterday, not at the bend near the sycamores or by the fence behind the Manwilson barn. But dogs don't always follow patterns the way people do, he'd reasoned. Maybe she'd found another patch of woods to nap in. Still, the quiet of the storm pressed against that reassurance, like a weight. By nightfall, the worry had begun to settle in. Not loud or sharp, but persistent, like a faucet dripping 3 rooms away. And next morning, visibility was worse. Joseph watched flakes drift sideways past the living room window for an hour before deciding on it. He couldn't sit inside again, not all day. Not while his mind traced routes that no longer felt poetic, but urgent. He packed his old hiking backpack with supplies: blanket, flashlight, a small first aid kit he hadn't used in years, a couple sandwich halves. The tin with the treats sat atop it all like a seal. He dressed slowly, layers over layers, gloves that didn't fit quite right anymore, and a scarf his daughter once mailed him from Vermont. Before he left, he pulled on his boots, their soles worn but stubborn, and opened the front door with a breath that fogged the air. He didn't take the truck, too risky. Instead, he walked, one careful step after another, through the thick snowbanks, past mailboxes he usually drove by, their flags barely visible under the frost. He called her name sometimes, not loudly, just enough that it danced across the stillness without breaking it. 2 hours passed before he saw the fallen branch. It lay heavy and skewed across the path near the creek just past Morgan's field. A fresh break, bark torn where the wind had snacked it from the old elm. Beneath its shelter of limbs, something golden stirred once, a twitch of an ear, the flick of a tail, and then stilled again. Joseph's breath caught. He dropped a bag so fast the strap stung his shoulders, knelt, fingers numb as they brushed away clumps of snow and brittle twigs. Sunny lifted her head, barely. Her eyes blinked slow and heavy, but they found his face. Tried to wag, but failed. "Oh, girl," he murmured. "Oh, Sunny." Her leg was tucked awkwardly beneath her. The slick of ice at her side suggested she'd slipped and slid hard. Maybe tried to make it to the root. To him. Carefully, Joseph wrapped the blanket around her, tucked the tin of treats beside her mouth until she sniffed at it faintly, then closed her eyes again. He touched her shoulder, warm even through the cold. "You waited," he said, voice cracking under the weight of it. He lifted her slow, cradling her like something breakable, carried her back through the snow in aching steps, resting only once when the wind carved sharp edges into his lungs. When he reached the yard, he didn't go to the porch. Not yet. He turned toward the shed where the light still worked and the heater hummed just enough. He made her a bed out of old towels and the spare coat that hung behind the door, set the food dish near her nose, wiped the ice from her paws with a gentleness that made him blink back something hot in his throat. She didn't move much, but she didn't shift away either. That night, he sat on an overturned crate beside her and hummed without thinking. Old hymnals, tunes with forgotten lyrics. His boots steamed quietly on the floor. By morning, she was still there, eyes open, breathing steadier. She licked his knuckles once when he reached out. Joseph let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding since the storm began. The next 2 weeks were a slow rhythm of mending. Sunny didn't leave the shed, and Joseph didn't ask her to. He brought blankets warmed from the dryer, bowls of broth, soft scrambled eggs when she could stomach them. She grew stronger inch by inch, started lifting her head when he entered. Tried standing, once, then twice, before her legs behaved again. One morning, she barked once, as if to test her own voice. The sound startled them both. As the snow thawed, she followed him into the house one evening. No coaxing, no leash. Just walked behind him across the threshold and settled by the hearth, as if she'd always known it for home. He smiled at her there, not with surprise, but with the heartbreakingly quiet joy of something found that could have been lost. By spring, she never wandered back to the woods. She slept on a second-hand dog bed in the corner of his room and rode in the truck with a little pillow he wedged between the seats. The patch of road near the sycamores still held something sacred to them both. But now, Joseph looked at it from behind the windshield, not searching, but remembering. And every day he drove by, he tapped the brakes just slightly, not because he needed to stop, but because it had been the place where life changed its rhythm without announcement. And sometimes you honor turning points with the gentlest pause. It started with the cap. Knitted wool, navy blue, with a little patch stitched to the front, an old postal emblem from a jacket someone's grandfather had donated years ago. Mrs. Halberd had made it after seeing Sunny perched in the front seat of Joseph's truck one morning. Nose to the wind, like a figurehead leading a ship, she handed it over without ceremony a few days later. Thought every member of the postal service should have a uniform, she said. Joseph turned it over in his hands. She won't keep that on. She will if you ask her nice, Mrs. Halberd said, then added as she turned to go, and if you bribe her with enough peanut butter. So Joseph tried. He held it out the next morning, let Sunny sniff it, and gently lowered it over her ears before their first delivery. She shook once, then nosed his coat for the bit of biscuit he always kept on hand now. It became part of their routine, like so many other things had. Cap on, side mirror adjusted, engine humming its rusted lullaby down roads mapped in memory. Word got out quickly. Mathers Grove was a town tuned to soft news more than headlines. Before long, children were rushing to the ends of driveways not just for Joseph's wave, but to see if Sunny was wearing her cap. Some mornings she didn't, the wind too wild or the day too warm. But on days she did, a chorus of delighted squeals often followed them down a block. The local paper ran a feature early one Thursday. "The Male Dog of Mathers Grove," the headline read. A full-color spread inside showed Joseph at the wheel, Sunny beside him with her ears perked and her cap slightly askew. They weren't the sort of people to seek attention, but they weren't the sort to avoid it either, once it came with kindness. After the article, the mail began changing. It started with a postcard from a little boy in Tallahassee, addressed to Sunny C.O. the Postman, Mathers Grove. Then a crayon-colored envelope with 6 stickers sealing the flap. "To the dog who delivers smiles." Stacked among utility bills and catalogs each morning, these became a kind of quiet celebration. Joseph tucked the cards in a shoebox he kept under the bench seat. He read them aloud sometimes during lunch breaks. Childlike scrawlings of affection, doodles of wagging tails, and one particularly elaborate drawing of Sunny piloting a jet with Male Force One written across the fuselage. No one joked anymore about whether she belonged to him. Belonging had taken on a new shape, shared, communal, without limits. Outside Spencer's Market, someone painted a bowl with her name on it, Sunny's Water Stop. 2 more followed at other shops before week's end. She sniffed each new dish with curiosity, then drank with quiet appreciation before trotting to the truck again. One afternoon, a line of second graders waved small envelopes at the mailbox in front of their school. Joseph stopped. A teacher smiled from the doorway, waved and said, "They wrote letters to the dog." He opened the flap. Inside, 12 notes with names like Maddie and Tomaz scribbled over torn paper. One read, "Dear Sunny, you are the best dog. Thank you for taking care of Mr. Mailman so he's not lonely. From Zoe." He folded that one gently and placed it in the glove compartment. Back at home, he found himself humming more often. Not just while driving, but while cooking. Small songs, half remembered from childhood, or made-up tunes with no words at all. Sunny would tilt her head at him, amused, ears twitching with each new tune that drifted across the kitchen tiles. The days felt easier with her in them. Not busier, not louder, but fuller. Simpler joys had become deliberate ones. A new rhythm lived in Joseph now. The mail he carried had always contained stories, but now his own days felt storied too. Not remarkable in any big sense, but threaded through with meaning. Sunny had changed how people looked at the route, at him. Neighbors who once waved now stopped to share small talk over the fence. They asked how she was doing, if she still rode shotgun, if she preferred beef or chicken. Once, at the post office, someone asked when Joseph might retire. He shrugged. "Not yet," he said. Truth was, there were still letters to carry, still morning fogs and porch light reflections to witness, still golden paws resting beside his boots as the wheels rolled down familiar roads. More than any of that, there was still the soft clink of her cap's patch and the warm presence beside him, tail thumping gently, with the rhythm of names being delivered, kindness being shared, and paths being walked together. She had always been light on her feet. Even as she grew older, there was something gentle about the way Sunny moved, like she never wanted to disturb the ground too much. But that summer, Joseph noticed her slowing. Not suddenly, not all at once. Just softer movements, more deliberate stances when jumping into the truck. Sometimes she'd pause before hopping up, front paws on the step as if asking him to wait a moment longer. Joseph adjusted without fuss. A little stool placed next to the cab, a folded blanket in the seat that gave her more traction. He shortened the route where he could, skipped the long incline past Hillside Drive, rearranged deliveries so they finished sooner. No one questioned it. The people of Mathers Grove had learned by then to trust quiet things. They could feel change on the breeze without needing it spelled out. Sunny continued to ride beside him most days, though her naps grew longer. He left the window cracked slightly, just enough for her nose to pick up the scent of pine and dust. On slow afternoons, he'd reach over while stopped and rest his hand lightly behind her ears. She wouldn't stir, except maybe to thump her tail once in approval. They still received letters, still found new water bowls appearing along the route, still heard the delighted whoops of children rushing toward their porches to glimpse her cap, even if most days she didn't wear it anymore. One morning in June, her legs trembled when she stood. She walked a little ways onto the porch, then sat and looked at him, not with pain, but with a kind of knowing. Joseph waited by the open door of the truck, sandwich packed, keys in the ignition. He clucked his tongue softly. "Come on, old girl," he said. But she didn't rise, just blinked at him slowly, the breeze curling her fur around her shoulders. She lowered her head to her paws and let out a long breath that spoke more than any bark ever could. He watched her for a while. didn't press, didn't coax. He nodded instead and stepped into the cab, started the engine with a low rumble, and eased the truck down the gravel lane. In the mirror, he saw her watching, that same peaceful gaze that had once followed him from the side of the road. He kept checking the reflection even when the house slipped out of view. When he returned that afternoon, silence met him. Not absence, just stillness, like the house understood something had ended. Joseph found her beneath the sugar maple, stretched long in the shade where she often lay after dinner, eyes closed, ears relaxed, not curled in pain or fear. She'd passed quietly, as she had lived, no fanfare, no noise. He sat beside her for a long while, hand resting on the ruff of her neck. The heat of the day softened in the grass around them. Somewhere in town, a bell rang once, half-hearted and far away. Word spread without declaration. Mathers Grove didn't hear these things, they felt them. The next afternoon, a small group gathered beneath the tree, unsure what to do with shared grief that came wrapped in respect. No speeches, just little things, a folded drawing from a child, a biscuit in a gingham napkin, a handful of wildflowers laid gently near her resting place. Mr. Dooling, usually gruff and impatient, removed his cap and stood silent for nearly 5 full minutes. A boy named Nolan brought a letter. Unsealed, scrawled in pencil, folded twice. He handed it to Joseph with 2 hands and eyes wide. "She was a good dog," he whispered, then ran back to his mother's side. That night, Joseph opened the letter beneath the porch light. It read, "I want to be kind like Sonny when I grow up. I want to make people happy just by being there." Joseph folded it once more, slipped it into the shoebox with the other letters. Then he sat down on the porch step and looked out past the fence, listening to the familiar sound of the wind moving through the trees. The sound of her name wasn't spoken aloud that evening. It didn't need to be. It rested in the air, the way songs do after the last note fades, still present, still echoing, even when the melody is gone.